Before I hand things off to Kristen Smith, I wanted to share a message from our project manager. Her name is Kristen Reinhardt Fernandez from RSA, and she would like to recognize the User Advisory Group, Maureen McGuire-Kulitz from George Washington University, John Wadsworth from the University of Iowa, and Beth Boland from Western Washington University and the Tribal Vocational Rehabilitation Institute. They're the ones that suggested this webinar on accessibility for educators so that they could use it in their counselor education programs. She also wants to thank our presenter today, Kristen Smith, who is the Section 508 lead at New Additions Consulting, and the NCRTM team for their hard work in putting this informative presentation together. And finally, she wants to acknowledge all of you for taking the time to strengthen remote learning experiences for individuals with disabilities. At that, why don't you take it away?
Great, thank you, Sherry. Hopefully everyone can see my screen. I'm Kristen Smith, and I'm an accessibility subject matter expert at New Additions. And today I'm going to lead this discussion for us, but we really want to encourage you to ask questions. There's going to be a lot thrown at you, but by all means, ask as many questions as you need and are comfortable with, and we'll make sure to get to them as best we can. So first, we're just going to jump right on in to look at the NCRTM Accessibility Resources page. We received a lot of questions about how do I even start with accessibility, or how do I even know my materials are accessible? And folks might also be wondering what resources are out there to help me on this accessibility journey. So we're going to start with looking at what is in the NCRTM Accessibility Resources website and their library. So you can start by going to the ncrtm.ed.gov website, which you can see on my screen. And the sixth option over here will be the Accessibility Resources link. And this is a really simple way for you to get to the Accessibility Resources page. So I'm just going to click that and take us there. I just kind of want to level set a second and talk about what accessibility is from a really high level. It's a set of standards or requirements that make sure that electronic and digital content is accessible to a wide variety of users. And what this applies to are documents, software, hardware, mobile apps, things like kiosks, and also content like sending an email. So here we are at the Accessibility Resources page. It contains quick guides and videos for understanding why accessibility is important, a simulation of a screen reader, and how a screen reader interacts with digital content. And I'd recommend watching this to understand that user experience. So these might be a great resource for you to start off looking at kind of what accessibility is, but also sharing it with leadership, colleagues, other folks to really drive home the importance of accessibility. We have a little note here at the top when accessibility applies, and Section 508 of the Rehabilitation Act applies to all federal agencies and institutions that receive federal funding. So as you're making training materials, keep in mind that accessibility is a requirement. So we'll take a quick look again at what else is on the page. Here we have some different document types: PDF, Word, PowerPoint, and Excel. And these are really the key documents that most people work with. On this page, we have brief tutorials, quick guides, and federal resources. PDFs we'll start with. It's the first one. It's also, I think, one of the more complicated documents to work with, but also something that people see really frequently. So let's take a look at PDF and take a look at these brief tutorial videos. PDFs usually always require some sort of manual fixing on the accessibility side, modifications of tags. So let's take a look at this video and navigate around what that looks like. Each video will tell you what the name is and also what is within the video itself. So part one here lets you know that this is related to tagging and reading order. For those of you unfamiliar with PDFs or the tag structure, I'll give you a quick overview of tags. They literally look like tags on a present. And tags are really the foundation and building block of PDFs for accessibility. If your document doesn't have tags, it won't be accessible. Tags communicate not only the reading order of content, but also describes what that content is. It tells the user, this is a heading, this is a table, this is a figure, this is part of my list, or this is just plain text. And to fix accessibility issues in PDF, you do need Acrobat Pro or DC. Reader won't work for this. So as you're watching these videos, also be mindful of the tool used. For Microsoft Office products, you don't need anything special to fix your content. A quick run through of how to access additional information here. In the YouTube description, you can hit this Show More link, and again, it'll reiterate what's contained in this video. So here, the PDF Accessibility Remediating Part 1 contains tagging and reading order, which is the fundamental thing for PDFs, artifacting, lists, and table of contents. So it'll tell you exactly what it covers, so you know if it's something you want to watch or not. Another feature I wanted to show while you're in YouTube is on the right-hand side of the screen, there's a playlist here. It's titled Accessibility Tutorials. And here you can select any video you want from that main Accessibility Resources page. So if you want to bounce around to Part 2, for example, of PDF accessibility, say you want to know how to fix a simple table, you can come here, select this, and it'll pop up. And again, down on the Show More section, it'll let you know what's in each video, so you can select a video and watch what you want. You can pick and choose videos based on your specific accessibility need, or you can choose to watch a specific part of the video that applies to your needs. So you might just want to start watching this from the beginning to figure out what you need to know for simple tables, and then stop watching it because your document doesn't have images. These are a really great way to start wrapping your hands around accessibility and a really great resource to come back to as needed. So now I'm going to go back to the main Accessibility Resources page, and we'll explore a little bit more about the resources on this page. PDFs are easier to make accessible if you create content with accessibility in mind. And since you don't create PDFs in PDF, you usually use something like Word or PowerPoint and then convert it to a PDF, we'll take a look at what other resources are on this page for creating accessible content. You'll see now we're on the Word Accessibility heading. We now have videos for creating accessible Word documents and then checking document accessibility in Word. We're really moving into how you can create accessible documents from the get-go, and it'll save you a lot of time, it'll save you a lot of effort, and ultimately just makes it a better experience for all the users. So on this page, along with the videos, which we just went over, there's also these quick guides that New Editions Section 508 team created. And what these are condenses the remediation effort into visuals and textual how-tos, and it's a really great guide. I recommend bookmarking them, printing them out. I don't think any of them are more than 3 pages. And it's just a really great way for you to just kind of mentally check, see what you need to do, see if you're creating it accessibly, and it's an easy guide also in terms of fixing your content. For Word, one of the key things to remember when creating content is to use the built-in styles. So use headings from the styles menu, create lists using the built-in list buttons, create tables using insert table feature, and auto-generate those tables of contents. This will all convert really, really nicely to PDF and align with appropriate tags. So if you're converting it to PDF, it'll make remediation really, really easy. The next document type I think most people use is PowerPoint. It's what we're using today to do some of this presentation later on, and it's something that can also be used to convert content to a PDF. For PowerPoint, use the built-in templates. It'll save you a lot of time and effort, but also reading order is a little different here. It's important because it's how assistive technology will interact with content, and it's the order in which content is read. But for PowerPoint, the reading order is actually bottom to top within the Arrange panel, which is a little unusual. The last document type we have here is Excel. And again, you have the tutorials, the quick guides. The most important thing to remember in Excel is to design tables programmatically. So again, using that built-in table tool. Keep the table simple. Don't have multiple levels of headers running across the top, and only have one table per worksheet. A general rule of thumb across the board for documents in creating them is use the built-in styles and layouts. And if you do that, you'll be baking in that accessibility. And again, it also saves you time. There are also some accessibility considerations that apply across the board, such as making sure your foreground and background colors have a strong contrast, and avoid using charts and graphics that use color only in their legend. Instead, use textures or visual labels as well, and we'll talk about that a little later today. So each of these document types, Word, PDF, Excel, and PowerPoint, they also have built-in accessibility checkers, which is a great tool to just double check your content. And each document type has a part in their tutorial videos that discuss the accessibility checker. The last thing I wanted to draw attention to are some of the federal resources listed here. So under each document type, there are federal resources that link to section 508.gov, which has a lot of good information about how to create Accessibly. And if you go to that site, it also has content well beyond document accessibility. It covers web accessibility, for example. There are also links to the U.S. Department of Education accessibility requirements and checklists. I have a couple preloaded here. It's a checklist that you can use as you're going through and verifying your content is accessible. Take advantage of the checklist that they've developed to really help guide you. And remember, all digital content must be accessible, and the requirements are listed here to make it really easy for you. So these next slides really incorporate a lot of the questions we got from participants, but also some things that we see pretty frequently as well. So this is also a time, if anything sticks out, please ask those questions so we can incorporate some answers in as we go. Now we've talked about kind of your resources available to you for creating accessible documents. Let's look at some additional considerations for accessible remote learning experiences. And we're going to dive right into platform and accessibility considerations. Here are just three of the largest considerations for choosing a platform, but every environment, every business need is going to be a little different. At a minimum, you need captioning capabilities or the ability for live transcription. Captioning is used by users who are deaf or hard of hearing and may be used by learners who have cognitive disabilities. It's also a really nice way for learners who may have had to step away for a second to be able to come back and check on what they missed. So I know most of us are probably working at home. If you have to step away to check on your child or dog or just refill your cup of coffee, it's nice to be able to come back and read the transcript as to what you might have missed and just catch back up. I use this myself. Some platforms might have built-in captioning or automated captioning that they'll add. It's a free service usually that uses speech-to-text software, which is essentially artificial technology. This is a newer technology that is improving, but accuracy might still be a concern. So before fully relying on it, use it, try it, and check for accuracy to make sure it's going to fully meet the accessibility needs of your learners. Others, like we're using today, are a hired captioning service with a person typing what is being said. With COVID, captioners have been hard to come by, so plan in advance to schedule your captioner. But accuracy here is checked by the person captioning, so you can be pretty confident your captions are accurate. One general rule of thumb, and I'm guilty of this always, and I was reminded about it today too, is to speak slowly when presenting. It gives everyone time to process, including captioners and sign language interpreters. So as a mental check, glance at the captioner and see if they've caught up to your speech, or if they are behind, and adjust your speech rate accordingly. If the captioner is lagging, it's a good mental check to slow down. And I've had to mentally check myself a couple of times already. You also want to make sure that your audio connection is really good. Use a headset, and that is going to help with clarity. Ensure you speak clearly and avoid a heavy use of acronyms. The captioner may not be used to your jargon. A best practice is to provide the captioners, though, some of your specific vocabulary up front so they can load it into their captioning machine. Also, and this is something that isn't necessarily an issue with a presentation like this, but might be something that comes into play when you have a very collaboratory environment. Remember to speak one at a time. It's hard for anyone to understand what's being said when everyone's talking over one another. It's also impossible for a captioner or sign language interpreter to be able to kind of sort out who's saying what and what they're saying.
Kristen, this is Sherry. Because this is so important, the captioning is very important. And as Kristen noted, there were questions about presentations for people with cognitive disabilities or just difficulty processing information. And when we use acronyms, many of us don't understand. So it's not just the captioner. It's also the audience that we need to pay attention to when we're speaking slow enough and we try to avoid acronyms.
Great point to reinforce, Sherry. The other thing is to also introduce yourself, especially in an environment where you might have, let's say, a roundtable or multiple people talking. It might be really important for the captioner or sign language interpreter to understand who is saying it and then what they're saying. And that leads us to discussion of sign language interpreting capabilities. This allows a sign language interpreter to call in via video and sign what's being spoken. This is usually a video window at the top corner of your screen. This allows users of sign language to follow along in their native language. The sign language interpreter's video should be placed on screen where its video doesn't obscure the presentation material, but also close enough that a sign language user can see both the presentation content and the interpreter on screen at the same time. Sign language interpreting, for those of you who are aware of accessibility requirements, is not a Section 508 requirement. It's a slightly higher requirement in the wider world of accessibility requirements, but it's something so important to allow people to communicate in their native language. So we're seeing a lot more of education adding it in and the federal government adding it in. Next is keyboard access. And this is really the ability to use all the necessary functions of the platform by keyboard only. And this is an absolute must for users of assistive technology, such as screen readers or text-to-speech, and learners with limited manipulation restraints. So all functionality that you want your users to interact with. Mute is a big one, or turning your video off, chat pods, Q&A, everything that you expect your learner to interact with should be keyboard accessible.
Kristen, this is Sherry again. For those of you who got the automatic calendar invitation, Stuart put a guide for access on the Adobe Connect platform so that keyboard users would be able to familiarize themselves or even possibly print out some of the keyboard access features that they wanted so that they're not trying to experiment during and take away their understanding of what you're trying to present because they can't navigate through your platform.
Absolutely. Providing as much information, and we'll touch on this a little later too, but providing as much information as you can to your learners up front about what content you're going to cover. So providing those materials up front, how to use the platform or the software you're using. I know that at the beginning of the pandemic, we were all kind of overloaded and overwhelmed with video conferencing systems and having to learn how to use that and navigate that. So as much information as you can provide up front about what you're doing and how to use it is really going to help your learners feel a lot more comfortable once they get into the environment itself. There are also multiple other requirements for platform accessibility, but keyboard access is a real showstopper. But most of the common platforms on the market today do have keyboard access, and they have keyboard shortcuts that really should be provided in some documentation on the platform, the vendor's website, but also feel free, like we've done here, to take that information out and provide it to your users up front so they know how to interact with the platform itself. And most have the ability to add captions and sign language interpreters. So the next thing we're going to talk about are platform accessibility resources. And we received a couple questions about the platforms out there, how accessible are they? There is a handout. I think the things to consider when hosting remote learning experiences should have a link to a document that does have a matrix of a number of the platforms out there, and take a look at that. But some folks might not have an option to use another platform because of their work environment. But if there are some accessibility requirements that the platform you're using just can't meet, bring them up to your management within your workspace and let them know that there's a real gap. That's really how you start to kind of move accessibility more to the forefront. One way to assess the accessibility of a platform is to look at what they call an accessibility conformance report, or you might hear it referred to as an ACR, or a voluntary product accessibility template, also commonly referred to as a VPAT. All of the platforms should have one of these posted on their vendor site. It's a rather long document of tables, but it lists all of the accessibility requirements. And it notes what accessibility requirement is supported, what is partially supported, or not supported. And it's a great way to quickly see what might not be fully accessible. And pay attention to what is partially supported or not supported, as this is a big red flag for accessibility. All right, I'm going to move to slide 4. Once you have your platform, now it's time to develop your content. And designing and developing accessibly upfront will always save you time. And again, refer back to the NCRTM Accessibility Resources page, watch those videos, use those checklists to really help you start to develop accessibly. But we do want to cover several core considerations when developing presentation content, and this really applies no matter the type of document or type of presentation you're giving. So the first one is to use clear font type and avoid small font sizes. Make it easy for learners to see your content and avoid those cursive-like fonts or something with a lot of movement, as I refer to it, and use large text so learners accessing from any screen, a mobile device to a computer, can really easily see your content. Here on our slide deck, we've tried to use at least 25-point font to ensure that even users on a small mobile screen can see the text easily. When showing your screen, like I did earlier, consider increasing your browser zoom size to make it easier for users to see. I was at 133%. And use clear fonts. And those were, I don't want to refer to them as boring fonts, but things like Times New Roman, Arial, Tahoma, things that are very clear and crisp. As Sherry mentioned earlier, avoid the use of acronyms and likewise use plain language. A good rule of thumb is to assume your learner is not familiar with the content. So spell out what you need and don't assume everyone knows your jargon. Also create simple content. Limit the use of animation and complex imagery and avoid significant slide clutter. This helps all learners, but especially learners with cognitive disabilities. You don't want distracting content to take away from your key points on a screen. So keep it simple. Avoid use of color only to convey meaning. This comes into play when you're using things like charts and graphs. They add visual appeal for sure, and different learners are more visual while other learners are much more used to having it audibly spelled out. So definitely don't shy away from using this stuff, especially like multiple ways to show information, because that really helps your learner. But make sure that you're making it accessible. So with charts and graphs, add a visual label to explain the colors in your legend, or use different textures. So you could do something like on a pie chart, use blue polka dots on a white background to show all the yes percentages, and then a black diagonal line on a light yellow background to show the no percentages. Just something to help users or learners who have color perception disabilities to be able to differentiate what you mean. So don't rely on color only. And then have a strong color contrast between foreground and background colors. This is also contained within the handout, the things to consider when hosting accessible remote learnings. So take a look at that handout as well. So avoid common pitfalls when it comes to color contrast, like a bright white or bright red on white, or light gray on white. Those are really hard to see. For those of you who might be familiar with using some color contrast tools, there is a tool called the Color Contrast Analyzer. That's a really easy tool to check your color contrast ratio. This might be a little in the weeds for some of you on the call, but the color contrast ratio that we're looking for small text is 4.5 to 1, and for large text, 3 to 1. And large text is 18-point font or larger, or 14-point in bold. I think a good general rule of thumb is if you take a look at it and you might notice yourself squinting or really having trouble discerning some of the letters or words, you probably don't have a good color contrast. And then last, create accessibly and provide materials in electronic format to learners. In providing materials in advance in case someone can't see the screen. It also may help students to note take on those slides you've provided in advance and serve as reference material later on. It also, I think, is a really good thing to do so that learners know what to expect coming into it, and they can kind of pre-prepare so they aren't overwhelmed by all the new content at once. And again, make sure your content's accessible and utilize those NCRTM accessibility resources. I am going to move to slide 5. And here we are going to talk about, so you have your platform, you have your content. Now it's time to present that content, actually engage with your learners. And we'll just touch on some things to keep in mind as you're presenting, and we'll explore how students participate in and engage with virtual content. And here we're going to want to consider a wide variety of learners. It also might help to consider how we are all accessing content now that we're working remotely. I can give a few personal examples in terms of when I need flexibility in how I'm accessing and receiving content. The one that happens most, as most of my colleagues know, is that I have to suddenly mute myself because the dog is barking too much, so I can't respond to questions or toss in my own thoughts verbally. So I need to use the chat feature. This also might be how learners who are deaf or hard of hearing, or for one reason or another can't speak, need to participate. I also might need to walk away for a second to answer the door, and the dog's still barking. Now I've missed content, and I need to reread the captions to catch up. Or technology isn't working, and I can only call in on my phone. And now I can't see the slides because the phone's so small. So I'm going to really rely on someone to read slide content and questions out loud for me to be able to fully participate and understand. So let's first consider learners who may not be able to see the content. This could be someone who is blind or low vision, or perhaps technology isn't working, so they just need to call in. We also have colleagues who might take this time out to go for a walk while also calling in, really want to stretch their legs. So there's a lot of reasons why someone might not be able to see the screen content that isn't just related to a disability. But the most important thing to take away from this is be sure to read everything on screen. Do not presume that users can see what you're talking about or talking to. Just make sure you read everything on screen so that everyone can receive the same information. This includes describing charts and graphs, telling the user what the point of your images are. Don't assume learners can synthesize that information, and this also plays into learners with cognitive disabilities. Don't make them guess what you mean, tell them what you mean. Let them know what is on screen and why it's there. For example, if you're showing a chart, don't say something like, you can see the results on screen and move to the next slide. Instead, say something along the lines of, the chart on screen shows the results of our recent poll. 40% of you answered you prefer summer weather. 50% of you said you preferred fall weather, and 10% said you preferred spring. Also, if showing a video or animation or something to kind of spice up your virtual learning experience, explain what's happening on screen for users that can't see it. One of the questions we got was how screen readers interact with virtual activities, and this is something I've received a lot too. So let's touch a bit on how screen readers like JAWS, NVDA, or VoiceOver interact with the virtual environment. Screen readers do just that. They read what's on the screen aloud to the user. Screen readers can't get into or access the content being shared on screen, like this PowerPoint right now. I can visually see this content, but programmatically, someone with a screen reader can't get in to my slide and read all of my bullet points right now, unless the presentation material is provided in advance and is accessible. Since assistive technology can't get into or access or read the content being shared on screen, it's so important to read out what's on that screen and explain it to users. Screen readers can access chat pods and other interactive content. They can get to the handout screen and download content there. They can add in their name and where they're from and a quick introduction in the chat pod. But it is a best practice and just a really good thing to do. When there's questions in the chat pod, be sure to read out the question or the comment before responding to it, again, just to make sure everyone's on the same page and has the same context. And I know we talked about this at the beginning of the presentation, but the NCRTM Accessibility Resources page does have that screen reader simulation video that I'd recommend. And again, providing your slides in advance and or as a supplemental download is also very helpful. So let's talk about some tips for learners who may not be able to hear content. We covered the importance of captions and sign language interpreters, but again, make sure you introduce yourself before speaking so that captioner and the sign language interpreter can capture that information and put it into text for users. Again, this is very important when you have multiple speakers. This also comes into play too, again, when you read your questions out loud, it's going to be captured by the captioner. So again, those folks are going to be getting that context to understand what that answer is. Any audio that you share, such as a video clip, audio clip, at the beginning of a presentation, during a presentation, it also needs to have captions or some text equivalent so that, again, users who can't hear the content can understand what is being said or played. Now let's consider learners who may not be able to easily comprehend content. Be mindful of cognitive overload. Having video on during a session with a bunch of moving faces might be overwhelming to a student. A large quantity of information or data can also be really overwhelming or distracting. So can a bunch of moving animation. Provide learners flexibility too in how they participate, and we're going to cover that in a second. But having a lot of heavy content and moving content can be really, really distracting, so limit these. Keep it simple if you're not sure. Also consider recording sessions like we're doing here. Providing it later allows learners to rewatch the content It also means they don't have to stress about note-taking. And providing that presentation content up front, again, helps everyone, but also allows learners to prepare in advance for the content, and it might make them feel less overwhelmed. And again, we mentioned this earlier, but also explain what's on your screen. Explain what you mean by that image, by the graphic, and what trajectory you're visually showing, say with a line graph. You don't necessarily need to read the data points if that's not the reason you put it up there. And it's okay to feel like you might be oversharing, but some learners really, really benefit from that. Recording the session and making it available later also helps learners who may have limited fine motor control. It means they don't have to rely on note-taking, and they won't be able to easily use assistive technology like speech-to-text while listening and participating in the online learning environment. A transcript from the captioning can also really assist here if for some reason or another you can't record or you can't provide the recording. Also providing multiple modalities to participate, meaning have different ways someone can respond, ask questions, etc. Learners may have a reduced ability to use a mouse or have a really slow response time with mouse or keyboard. So give learners ample time to answer questions. If you have polls or quizzes, give them time and space to be able to put questions in a chat pod, raise their hand, stuff like that. Last, providing multiple ways to communicate and collaborate adds accessibility for learners with a variety of disabilities. So have multiple modalities and inputs for things like breakout sessions, chats, Q&A. For example, consider users who may not be able to speak, so have a typing input such as a chat pad. Or for people who may not be able to type, have a verbal input, a phone, speaker. This also includes multiple ways to access content, for example. The captioning pod can be streamed outside of Adobe Connect. Also account for different devices a user might need to access the content. Some of you might be calling in on the phone only, some using a desktop, some using a small phone. So allow for multiple inputs and ways to access the webinar as well. To keep learners engaged, you probably don't want just a monotonous lecture. You probably do want some interaction, playing videos, play audio, have discussion groups. Just remember, learners might access things differently, and just to make sure you're considering accessibility at every step of the way. So if you wanted to spice up your teaching with having some sort of audio play, make sure you have a transcript available for folks who can't hear it. Or if you want to play a video, make sure it has captions and narration of what's going on. So I know we've talked a lot out at you, but the NCRTM Accessibility Resources site is, again, a really great way to kind of level set and help you on your accessibility journey. So with that, Sherry, I will turn it over to you for the next slide.
Thank you so much, Kristen. And there is a lot to take in, and that's why we put together that accessibility resources page. That's particularly good for beginners. For advanced folks, there are some things that we can help you with later. Here's some additional resources from the NCRTM, because it's not just about process and delivering accessible information. It's about delivering great information that your students can use. And every month we provide a newsletter, the New from NCRTM newsletter. You can subscribe from our homepage in the bottom right corner. And in the last newsletter, for instance, we provided some resources for folks during the COVID-19 to rethink how they might have pivoted quickly to respond to the pandemic, but now that it's been over a year, thinking about what other folks have done and options for doing this for the longer term. So we have one on providing transition services for students with disabilities during COVID-19 outbreak. That's from the National Technical Assistance Center on Transition. And particularly check out their online instruction resources and tips for delivering classroom instruction remotely. And then the Center for Innovative Training in VR have put together a nice telecounseling resource collection. and start with choosing an online platform. A little bit more about that. We do not endorse any particular platform, but it is helpful to be able to compare what's out there. So we added this resource from the Deaf and Hard of Hearing Technology, Rehabilitation, Engineering, and Resource Center on video conferencing and platforms that looks at the different accessibility features. So we're all about the library. Check out our library. Use some of the filters to find things to complement what it is that you're trying to do. Our resources have been developed through RSA Technical Assistance Centers, their grantees, and other partners and trusted resources. So it's not just necessarily someone's opinion, but most of what we have is based on research or recommended practices. And finally, for accessibility, we provide not only the Section 508 accessible supplemental training resources for you that are in our library, and all videos are captioned, the sites are accessible, the handouts are accessible, and there's some of these are self-study guides, so you can use it for your students, for toolkits for them to learn when you're not teaching them. We also provide feedback for folks who upload the materials to the NCRTM that may not be accessible, and it might be just, I know one common area that Stuart often talks about is that something has not been tagged, so the screen readers will not understand the reading order. And so she may give you feedback on how to do that. And sometimes for those of you who want it or need it and who are RSA grantees, including the state vocational rehabilitation agencies, we can set up a one-on-one technical assistance so that you can get better at making your documents accessible. And Kristen keeps referring you back to the Accessibility Resources page. We love it when people can understand the content and can use it to make a difference in the lives of people with disabilities. So we hope that you will do that also. At that, as you have questions, just contact us at the NCRTM at neweditions.net. Please follow us on Twitter. We tweet about a lot of accessibility items, and subscribe to our newsletter. Thank you so much for attending.